Hi. So we're back with another reading installment of The Dry Wood by Caryll Houselander. If you're joining us for the first time, we're on chapter 8, Saturday night. Things are just about to get pretty exciting because the parish is about to go to confession. Always a lot of fun. The novena to heal Willie Jewel has begun. The church is very nervous. Little backstory: Father Malone was a beloved priest. He has died. And there is a lot of hype and excitement. A lot of people believe he's in heaven. And this is creating some, I don't know, some people are upset about this drama, I guess. They're petitioning that he allow a boy to live who is beloved of the parish as well. His name is Willie Jewel. And so that novena has begun. It's Saturday night. Father O'Grady, great character, is just about to go to confession. So let us begin. He's just about to hear confessions. Chapter 8, Saturday night. And blessed is he that shall not be scandalized in me. Taken from Matthew, chapter 11, verse 6. There is something mysterious about Saturday night. It is a night of quickening, of the heightening and raising of psychological temperatures. It is payday when whether one should spend it or not, for a few hours one has money to spend, and for a few hours there is freedom from office, factory, and shop. Whatever happens on Saturday night can be slept off on Sunday morning. Tomorrow morning there is no work, there is no alarm clock, no shout of time to get up. Tomorrow no one will be a cog in a machine, a voice in a chorus of voices, a face in a multitude of faces. Tomorrow everyone will be himself or herself, even if only by dropping out for a few hours. I guess that's now our Friday night. It's a little bit different. On Saturday night, the streets come alive, the routine is broken, the tension is off. There is the chink of money, the public houses are lit up and noisy. On weekdays, the same public houses are there too, but they are quieter, different. Some of them have even a kind of secrecy. They are places where it is sometimes possible to get away, to be warm, to be alone. There are some down the side streets that are furtive. But on Saturday night, they are loud and light and noisy, kindly and quarrelsome. After a few drinks, feeling runs higher. Human nature is more vulnerable, more defenseless. Sentiment flows over and spills into indiscriminate lovemaking. A spark of anger blazes up suddenly into a fire that is out of hand. The darkness on Saturday night has its own quality. It is no longer a cover laid silently over the ardors and sorrows and sweetness of the world. It hums and throbs and sings. It is splashed and fretted with light. The doors of the pub swing open and shut. Gusts of sound and light spatter the pavement. There are sudden glimpses of men and women dark upon a glow of gold, and sudden bursts of laughter or of noisy weeping. Sometimes all the darkness of the night and all its laughter and all its sobbing are gathered and swung between the pavement and the stars in the music of an accordion. The boys and girls out of the factories walk hand in hand in the streets. They are lovely with the slender loveliness of the poor when they are young. The girls blossom in just the way of those Japanese flowers the children drop into water as a tiny round circle, which immediately wriggles and puts out tendrils of yellow, vermilion, emerald, and blue that twist and writhe and sprout into fantastic little flowers. Hair that has been in curlers all week comes out. Cheeks that were white are made pink. lips that were faint coral are scarlet. The very young factory workers walk hand in hand through the gold-fretted darkness, dreaming and shy, shaken with the glory of one another, breathless with the new swift passion of innocence on fire. There is also intense activity in the Catholic Church. Saturday night is bath night. It is also the bath night of souls. Of course, people go to confession on. So it's Saturday night is bath night. It is also the bath night of souls. Of course, people go to confession on all the other days and nights too, but Saturday is an accepted night when every Catholic, everywhere in the world, knows that he will find the church buzzing with a businesslike activity that is no outward showing of the unutterable mystery that is taking place, and is often shocking to the uninitiated. No wonder, for even in its holiest acts, human nature is imperfect, and there is shoving, pushing, muttering, and gate-crashing, even in the queue outside the confessional. Since the Lord commands that the tares and the wheat be left growing together until his coming, you must, until that blessed day, have your viciously pious old lady who prods her neighbor with her umbrella in confession queues, side by side with the lowly and humble of heart who is prodded, and the penitent who, unconscious of the mote in his brother's eye, prays undisturbed and unnoticed, his whole being withdrawn into the stillness of love. When Father O'Grady hurried into church, his penitents were already waiting for him like a hungry and impatient breadline. He had hardly time to put on his stole before the first two were in, one on each side, like two hungry birds waiting their crumb of heaven. They were simple people. So if you're not sure how to picture that, that would have been the old-time confession boxes where the priest sat in the center, and then you would go on one side and wait your turn while he would turn to whoever was on his other side, And then and there'd be like a little window you could open and shut. I've been in those, and it's not very comfortable because you have to sit there and like plug your ears. I like single room ones. Anyways, they were simple people who understood very little about the grace that they were receiving. Some of them, if they had understood, would have fought shy of the torrent of light that was being poured over them. Their ears were tuned to the undertones of this world, their eyes used to its gray twilights. They could not have borne the splendor of the God who came to them in this narrow box, but for the divine ingenuity of his love, which used their very blindness and deafness and denseness for his disguise, and came to them clothed in their own limitations. Father O'Grady understood his people. He knew that they were coming to be fed. Penance is sorrow for sin and forgiveness, but it is much more, too. It is the good shepherd feeding his sheep, feeding his lambs, and a crumb of the bread of life is the whole of life. He closed his eyes and murmured the first blessing. A scruffy little acolyte told the usual story on one side. A very old woman told it on the other. After them came the long line of pious women hankering after consolation, the emotionally starved hungering for a little sweetness, a little taste of sugar on the living bread, the young men who found it so difficult to make a firm purpose of amendment and to try to avoid the dangerous occasions of sin, the boys and girls, the devout old men, the aging children of Mary, who were eager to confess their neighbor's sins as well as their own, the sailors who had met temptation under bluer skies and in lovelier guise than it is met in Riverside, the mothers who must hurry so that the fathers who are minding the children could come after them, and the children who had only lately made their first confessions and still came quite simply to receive the embrace of their little Lord. As time wore on, a few drifted in from the streets who, if they were not drunk, had, as the Irish say, drink taken, and when they had said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," they were apt to begin to weep. Father O'Grady told them to go away and come back when they were sober, but he feared that they would not come back, and he grieved over them. He felt that they were drifting away, but that they would always know the drag at the heart, and that wherever they went, whatever they did, whenever anything touched them, be it a glass of beer or Star of the Sea played on a barrel organ, they would be homesick. Half an hour passed, an hour and a half. Father O'Grady grew stiffer and colder. He was cramped in the tiny box and could not stretch his legs. The chair was hard and straight-backed. Little points of rheumatism in his shoulders and in the back of his neck first began to ache and then to burn. His head ached too, and the air ceased to be air and became a cold, fetid stuffiness. Man, it's like being in a plane and listening to confessions. That sounds pretty uncomfortable. Trying to make sure that I'm in front of this mic. Well, sorry. The penitents whispered the miserable little stories of sin on breath that was rotten with garlic. The priest had to make repeated acts of faith that the murmurs of attrition, which caused such uneasiness in the pit of his stomach, also caused the angels of God to rejoice. But then, he thought, Almighty God in his providence has given them no stomachs to turn. I think I read that incorrectly, so hold on, let me try that again. The priest had to make repeated acts of faith that the murmurs of attrition, which caused such uneasiness in the pit of his stomach, also caused the angels of God to rejoice. But then, he thought, Almighty God in his providence has given them no stomachs to turn. He leaned towards each one, offering up the discomfort, the nausea, the boredom, because he knew that in these people Christ had his will. In them, on this Saturday night, he renewed the life of the whole world. In this little box, the impact of love between God and man happened again. The world kissed the holy wounded feet in the dust. The priest thanked God that it didn't matter at all that his own soul was dry and his body aching, that it was only with an effort that he could concentrate on each confession, not letting his mind wander for a second, so that he would be obliged to ask some poor child of God to repeat something over again, that it was harder and harder as each one came to the end, to think of even the most obvious platitudes to whisper for their encouragement. He knew that it wasn't himself that mattered, He knew that it wasn't himself that mattered, though since God chose it to be so, he had to be there, just as the clay made of earth and spittle that Christ chose to put on the blind man's eye had to be there. He was glad that he had the cramp, the headache, the rheumatism, and the nausea, because he had nothing else to offer in cooperation with God's huge intent of love. The humanity of the Son of God is too big for men. It scandalizes them. That he should pour the waters of life over souls on their weekly bath night. That he should renew the life of the world, not only in the inspired, the saints, the prophets, but in the maimed, the halt, and the blind, in the inarticulate, the uninspired, the short-sighted, the dogged Saturday night regulars, that on the night of the sharpening of physical life, of the heightening of human emotion, with its taking hold of the heart and its sudden pang of desire, he should quicken his own life, his own immaculate passion of love in the hearts of sinners. That he, the omnipotent, the immaculate, the eternal, should become part of Saturday night. That is too much for the littleness of men. Half an hour and a half, 2 hours. The scuffling and bustling in the church had subsided. Now the remaining penitents were those last in the queues who will surely be the first in the kingdom of heaven. There was silence now, so that the drifts of sound from the street came in, but they sounded far away. And inside there was only the inaudible whispering from the confessional, like the rustling of sleepy birds in the boughs of a great tree. At last it was over, the last absolution given, the last kiss on the hem of Christ's garment, and Father O'Grady could go. Wow. Anyone ever had to wait 2 hours for confession before? Chapter 9. The Waters of the Thames. Save me, O God, for the waters are come in even unto my soul. Psalm 68. When the house was still and Father Perivale had gone to bed, Father O'Grady lit his candle and went to his own room, the room which had been Father Malone's. He occupied it because he supposed that it was his duty to do so. He was rector now. He had inherited the burden of a saint. He did not feel worthy to breathe the same air that the old man breathed. He thought that this room should be closed until the glorious day when peals of silver bells in Rome should proclaim the saint to the whole world. When that day came, the room should be thrown open to pilgrims. But he had no right to behave now as if the thing he longed for was an accomplished fact. So Father O'Grady used the rector's room, and in it he kept a guilty secret. In a locked cupboard, he had a few relics of Father Malone for the future veneration of the faithful. These were his rosary, mended with string in several places, his breviary, with its thin pages worn to a feathery softness, his old hat, shabby and mossy beyond description. There was the pair of shoes that he had got when he changed his own with the derelict man in the street. And most precious of all, there was his foul old pipe, of which he had often said himself that no man could smoke it without a special grace. It would never have entered Father O'Grady's head that he could be a saint himself. But when Father Malone died and he had to take his place, it had seemed that the only way to avoid letting his people down was to copy the saint they loved, just in exterior things. He told himself that he must walk in the old man's shoes, but humbly, walking only a few steps at a time to start with. Those first few steps set his feet on the stony path of holiness. Metaphorically, as well as actually, Father Malone's shoes were stiff and full of nails. They let in the water. They fitted only on the footsteps of Jesus Christ. They fitted only into the footsteps of Jesus Christ, scored on the hard paving stones of the London streets. The holiness of Father Malone had been a thing of tremendous simple reality. It started at his mother's knee when he was a barefooted Irish boy, and it never lost the clear objectivity of a child's heroism. It was concerned, not with fine shades of spirituality, but with flesh and blood, with such concrete things as food and drink and tobacco and clothes, such things as daily mortification of the appetite, of human respect, of sleep, and of countless harmless indulgences that make life tolerable to most human beings. There is nothing so definite, so searching as the sanctity of children. It asks no questions, has no doubts, it dares everything, but expects nothing of self. Therefore it is incapable of delusion. It is sacramental, offering its substance of flesh and blood for daily, hourly transubstantiation. It is an uncompromising little measure of the will to love, as hard and straight and well defined as a wooden ruler in school, marked with inches and half inches and tenths of inches. Let's try this out. Okay. Turn to the miracle workers, to certain of the saints who lived long ago in the enchanted woods and magic mountains of sanctity, and you can find escape, or think you have found it, from the personal responsibility of holiness. You can delude yourself with the comforting thought that it is a presumption to expect wonders and miracles from yourself, to hope that the intricate refinements of your spiritual life should give you as much faith as a grain of mustard seed. But the sanctity of childhood, which happens to be the characteristic sanctity of the 20th century, is an unanswerable challenge, or rather a challenge to which the only answer is yes. It is plainly within the capacity of everyone who has a body and soul and the ordinary limitations and weaknesses of human nature. Nothing else but that, and the grace of God, which can be had for asking, is required. It is in the eyes and ears and the tongue, in the hands and the feet and the tips of the fingers. It is in the narrow kitchen, the office chair and the low bed. It is in the food on the table. It is in the milk or water or wine in the cup. Can you drink the chalice that I drink of? Yea, Lord, we can. Father O'Grady put down his candle on the table and opened the window on to the night. Another Saturday was past. It was dark now and still. Riverside slept. All day long he looked forward to this hour from midnight to 1 o'clock. He thought of it as the time when he would gather himself together into one whole, complete act of adoration. Nothing in the daytime ever seemed complete. Everything that he began was interrupted and cut short. No action, no thought, no conversation, no prayer ever seemed to be whole, completed, finished. Everything was broken. Everything was hurried or interrupted, or left with untidy loose ends. Even things that had to be completed were disintegrated by distractions. Even things that had to be completed were disintegrated by distractions. The lives of really holy people seemed to be so different. They wrote out neat little timetables, including luxurious hours of solitude, of meditation, half hours before the Blessed Sacrament, prudent recreation, and so on. And when people called on them and made demands on them, they were, as indeed in these circumstances they might well be, calm and charming, and able to give an impression of having unlimited time to give, and no preoccupation in life so absorbing as the trivialities of this individual's mind. I love those 2 paragraphs. Father O'Grady had tried writing out timetables too, even including time to answer letters and to write an occasional one to his brother in Dublin, whom he was devoted to, but he had not seen for a matter of 10 years or more. But his timetables were never adhered to for as much as a single day or even a single morning. There were people at the sacristy door waiting to break into his thanksgiving, people in the hall of the presbytery asking him to hurry over his breakfast, people calling at every hour of the morning, afternoon, and evening, and every one of them had some urgent matter that could not wait, or some burden that could no longer be carried alone, or some secret which they could not live face to face with by themselves, and to each and every one of them the priest belonged. There were sick calls day and night. There were accidents in the docks and the broad road that swept through Riverside from the water's edge to the West End, and over again the priest had to hurry to one of his poor, crushed, and broken children with forgiveness on his tongue and in his hands, and the eternal love in a golden pyx over his heart. There was the endless business of the parish, the debt on the church, the fund for building the new schools, the endless red tape of the county council about the old schools, the parish bazaar, the whist drives, the socials, the meetings, devotions, quarrels, and snobberies of the children of Mary, the societies, groups, guilds, movements of Catholic action, constantly being founded by visitors from the West End and dropped again, the endless complications caused by the undisciplined fervor and unmortified zeal of the visiting faithful, and the disciplined apathy and bored fidelity of the local faithful. That is such a description of parish life. The unmortified zeal of the visiting faithful and the disciplined apathy of the local faithful. Oh boy. There was the presbytery that was in constant need of repair, the slates falling off the roof, the chimney smoking, the drains going wrong, the pipes bursting, everything always corrupting and coming to pieces. Human nature most of all. Men's souls and minds had to be constantly washed, bound up, propped up, and repaired, or they lost in the fight with corruption and fell to pieces. The priest had a haunting sense of disintegration all the time. Everything was always being broken up. The work of all the priests before him for Christian education, the work that the nuns and schoolmistresses did on the souls of children who drifted into faithless ways so soon after school days ended. Well, I guess it's not our century only. The buildings, the people's homes, the church, the presbytery, always falling down, as if sin, the most disintegrating thing that there is, had even entered into brick and wood and stone. So too with his own thought, even his own prayer. From without and within, this process of breaking up, pulling apart, scattering. He went on cherishing the illusion day after day that the late night, with its solitude, must bring integrated prayer, that he would be able to gather his thought into a circle of light, into the unity of a shining ring, a crown of prayer, and in that prayer his whole being, body, mind, heart, and soul, would be one still, concentrated act of adoration. He often thought of our Lord's Prayer at night and reflected that he, even he, felt the necessity of going away to be alone to pray. But he did not reckon with the limitations of his body. When he imagined that hour of wholeness, that solitary ring of light in the darkness of night, he forgot that he would be cold and sleepy, and that the very first act of contrition for his own sins and the sins of his people would scatter, that the words would fall away as if they were seeds scattered in a drift of wind. He blew out the candle, opened the window, and knelt down in the middle of the room. He covered his face with his hands, but no words came to him, no thoughts, not even an aspiration or any center or point of stillness that even the vainest wishful thinking could have mistaken for the prayer of quiet. He tried to examine his conscience, to make at least formal acts of contrition for himself and for his people, but the words fell away like dust. He was only aware of sin as a wound that afflicted his people and bled in him. The words of contrition were bleeding from his brain, and his mind was left white and wordless. He heard the ship's hooters deep and mournful through the darkness. They at least gave a voice to the loneliness of man. It was so still that the river itself was audible, dark water gently lapping against the dock side. Father O'Grady resigned himself once more to his limitations. He offered what he called the prayer of the body, the empty mind, the aching limbs, the struggle with sleep, the longing to be in bed, the effort of will that kept him on his knees for the endless hour, which was no longer, and even in his own mind, the hour of completeness which he had thirsted for, but an hour to be adhered to with his will, offered up with the countless other things that he had offered up in every 24 hours, from the irritating wheezing of the test of faith to the sense of the sins of the world heavy on his own soul. He longed for the hour to be over, the hour he had reached out to with hands of light all day long. He longed for the warmth of his bed and to have his head on the pillow. He was numb with cold. His head rested on his arms on the table, and only one phrase went through his mind over and over again like a broken-down gramophone that repeats half an inch of the record over and over again. Save me, O God, for the waters are come in even unto my soul. He had wanted his prayer to be a draught of the shining water of life, clear and sparkling, a fountain springing up from the dry dust of his heart. But the water that entered into his soul was the dark, mysterious water of the Thames. The water that carried men away to other lands, that brought them from distant, unknown worlds to London, that carried merchants and sailors and travelers to and fro on errands that sometimes separated, sometimes united men forever. The waters that flowed with the tears of old mothers and lonely lovers. The waters that ran strong and black with tides of longing and of destiny, bringing men and women to one another's arms or sweeping them away over 7 seas. The waters that carried food and wine and merchandise to and fro between the cities of the world, cargo of fruit, grapes and oranges and golden pomegranates, sugar candy, candy peel and spice, tea and coffee and sugar and nuts, bales of cotton and wool and silk, dyed vermilion and emerald and blue, and rugs from Persia and China and Egypt and India, and treasures of ivory and teakwood, metal and copper and jade, all the full measure of daylight for the feast and splendor and laughter of living. The water that whispered dark secrets down its tides, drugs that passed swiftly, silently from hand to hand, from thin yellow fingers in far-off lands to hands tattooed with flowers and hearts entwined with roses, to hands already crimson with blood and black with the touch of evil gold, to terrible soft hands white in the moonlight with scarlet nails. Waters that carried outcasts and derelicts and the lost and the forgotten, all the flotsam and jetsam of wrecked humanity to and fro through time to the ultimate harbor. Waters that caressed strange little wooden wharfs, running furtively beside ramshackle warehouses and taverns, where here and there a light behind a blind in a window cast a shower of golden petals on the dark ripples. Water that carried rats along the side of the wharfs and into the ships and cities. Water that knew dark and lovely secrets. Water that is the soul of London and brings the world to her heart. Water that is part of the darkness of humanity, flowing forever round the mystery of its light. Water that is, with all its whispering and weeping and seeping darkness, symbol of the water of life. Water of the Thames, dark and lovely water, gently lapping against the dock side. Chug, chug, chug of the river Thames against the wharf, and Father O'Grady rocking into the sleep of the dark water. Now his deep breathing, too, is woven into the lapping of the river, and the rest of his prayer is sleep. Save me, O God, for the waters are come in even unto my soul. And she really waxes, doesn't she? I like it. She writes a lot of prose as well, if you enjoy her. She's more well known for her articles and commentary, I guess. Okay. Chapter 10. Rose O'Shane. If I ascend into heaven, thou art there. If I descend into hell, thou art present. Psalm 138. Every evening at 6 o'clock, Rose O'Shane walked slowly down Mimosa Street to the Cat and Fiddle. She was beautiful with a large and splendid beauty, beautiful in face and body, in her slow, majestic movements, the honey of the words on her tongue, in her tenderness to weak and helpless things. Beautiful above all in the charity which glowed in her like a heap of red embers, which a mere sigh from any poor creature at all could fan into a bright flame. Her progress down Mimosa Street was magnificent. She wore a feathered Gainsborough hat on the back of her head, where it had slipped as her dark red hair fell down in locks on her shoulders. Her fur coat swung open and sagged from her arms. Her blouse and skirt, bored with each other, yawned apart in a wide gap. Indeed, it seemed that only her dignity kept any of her clothes on her body, as if it acted on them like a magnet. It was common property that Rose O'Shane had known better days. The fur coat, the astonishing hats, the quality of her thought, even the way she walked, told of better days. But no one asked her anything, for there was that about her that made even the most insensitive pretend not to see the bold patches like mange on the old fur coat, the antique style of the feathered hats, and all the rest of the rust and tarnish on her glory. Above all, everyone by unspoken consent pretended not to know that Rose O'Shane took too much to drink. Not that this was considered very shocking in Riverside, or that it was a rare thing, but the people felt that in some indefinable but positive way, Rose was a superior being. She was their aristocracy, their personal royalty, and they identified themselves with her in this, although it was this very quality which set her apart in a strange, inevitable loneliness, despite the fact that she was given to these people, spent for them, even squandered on them, by a positively profligate charity. It would have been personal humiliation to her friends to think of her as a tippler, like any of the other tipplers who shuffled along Mimosa Street in carpet slippers and their hair in curlers, for their pint of beer, or to admit that her feet could possibly be set on the same road as those wrecked old women who were dragged shouting and sobbing and laughing with the terrifying laughter that is out of control to the cells every Saturday night as regularly as clockwork. Sometimes they met her coming back from the Cat and Fiddle, still steady, for she was always steady, but with her face a little smeared. Then they did not look into her eyes. Because of that courtesy, mixed as it was with their own vanity and shame, they were spared seeing those wise and gentle eyes looking back at them through a heavy mist, and the warm, intelligent beauty of that face smeared like a soft pencil drawing that someone has rubbed with his fingers. She was the subject of endless rumor. It was said that some worthless fool had let her down, that she once had a lover who had died. Some even said that she had a husband whom she supported, hidden away somewhere. But no one ever knew, and no one ever asked personal questions of Rose O'Shane. Of one thing everyone was sure. Somewhere in the story there was love, for only love could have awakened compassion like the compassion that Rose O'Shane gave to all the world. She ought to have been the foundress of an order of mercy. To have mothered countless orphans, succored prisoners, tended the sick, administered vast fortunes to the poor. As it was, without an outlet at all for the magnificence of her nature, pity was her undoing. No one knew what Rose O'Shane did. She was gone every morning at 8 and back again at 6. That everyone knew. What they did not know was that she was a washer-up. Between 9 and 5, she washed up greasy dishes, greasy plates, greasy pots and pans in a West End restaurant. In the morning, she washed last night's dinner things. They were the worst. They had been piled up by the sink all night, and the grease was congealed and hard. It also had little tracks of the feet of mice all over it, and the fat and gristle left on the plates was always nibbled by mice. The lunch was not so bad. There was a chance to rinse the plates before the grease hardened, and sometimes she was able to drink quite a good glow into her by draining all the glasses of the dregs as they came out. On very rare occasions, the waiter Joseph brought her out a whole glass of Chianti. Joseph was a Catholic like herself, and therefore she felt able to discuss things with him more intimately than with the others. But he was permanently disgusted by the sight of people eating, and so obsessed by it that he could talk of very little else. "These English," he was forever repeating. "These English have put all their emotions into eating. It is because of Queen Victoria. No, I am not laughing. I am in deadly earnest. Queen Victoria and the Protestant religion have made the English afraid to be natural." I don't know where he's supposed to be from, so Joseph. Actually, it looks like it's supposed to be German. We'll have to make him German. It's a lot easier to do a German accent than like a able to be understood Italian accent. "These English," he was forever repeating. "These English have put all their emotions into eating. It is because of Queen Victoria. No, I am not laughing. I am in deadly earnest. Queen Victoria and the Protestant religion have made the English afraid to be natural human beings. In their lives, they try to kill every emotion because every emotion is embarrassing or improper. Why an Englishman thinks that it is improper to be in love with his own wife, and what does he do? I will tell you, for I see it every day of my life. He puts all his grand passion, which he cannot kill because he is after all a man, he puts it all into the eating of a beefsteak or goulash. And his tenderness, what does he do with that? I will tell you, for I know. It is bestowed on a dish of young duckling and sweet green peas. I do not know why I am not dead, why I have not died already from a permanent disgust." That is so funny. "But," Rose would answer, "eating can also be beautiful. Once as a child, I heard a remark about it which I have never forgotten. It was from a Protestant clergyman, too. Every time we break bread, he said, we should do it in memory of Jesus Christ, and every meal should be a communion with one another." The chef, a French atheist, was impatient of these discussions. He would put on a face as red as a turkey cock, crowned with a towering white cap, round the door and shout, "Allez oop, Joseph! Allez oop! Everything is spoiled if you don't hurry up. Not that I care, these English are as much pleased to eat a boiled flannel as the most perfect goulash or moussaka." And he would spit neatly all along the top of the souffle, for which the house was famous. For that, he said, was the secret of a good French souffle. "Allez oop!" And then there was Armand, who was a Turk, and who pickpocketed on his day off, because he was paid a starvation wage for making a thick black treacle called Turkish coffee and giving tone to the house. He would look with a slow smile, which could equally well have been an expression of amusement or hatred at each of the others in turn, and say, "It is well for the English. Those who can eat most tasteless food win wars. Therefore, the English will win the war that is certainly." I was afraid I might have to do a Turkish accent. And I guess I don't have to do a Turkish accent, but how can you read something that's supposed to be by a Turk and not do a Turkish accent? I guess if you don't know a Turkish accent. If you are accustomed to just the right seasoning, the right piquance, well, you have no power to endure, for wars now are wars of the stomach. If you can enjoy to eat boiled flannel, very well, you are lord of the world. No one can conquer you. The restaurant was cosmopolitan, and that was one reason why Rose O'Shane was able to endure it. To this one fetid, verminous little building came people from all over the world. Indeed, Rose often thought, as she made her way back to Riverside, weary from those long hours standing by the sink, there are many lost lands in London, a little homesick Italy, a few streets that are France, a teeming commercial road with its homes hidden behind it like a market woman's children hiding in her skirts. That is Israel. A few narrow, picturesque streets running down to the water's edge that are a lost little China. It reminded Rose of the Tower of Babel, for she knew that though everyone spoke English, and some had grown up never knowing their own language, there is a confusion of hearts that has succeeded the confusion of tongues, and these people living side by side in one city could not speak or understand or learn the languages of one another's souls. In Riverside, they all came to Rose O'Shane with their sorrows and their joys. They came as naturally as a thirsty man goes to water to drink, or a weary man lays his head down on a pillow to sleep. Sailors who had come home from long voyages to find their wives gone away, or worse, to find themselves fallen out of love with faithful wives. Girls who could not get any young man to look at them, though they were prettier far than some others who had followers like a queue for a cinema. Boys and girls who were truly in love and saw no hope at all of getting married. Boys who were out of work and so bored that they almost wanted to break in somewhere and steal to break the monotony, and some who had. Many derelicts of the Catholic Church came to her, too, and began to look again at the pitiful face of God because there was someone in the world as holy as Rose O'Shane, whom you could nevertheless have a drink with and crack a joke with. That people came to her with their joys as well as their griefs tells more than anything else of the character of Rose O'Shane. Few people have fingers so sensitive that they can touch other people's joys without taking off the bloom of them. That's so beautiful. That's so true. It is here that the touch of love can be recognized, the touch that increases joy, the touch with which Christ changed water into wine at the wedding feast at Cana. She listened, too, to the endless litany of little ailments, and she had no contempt at all for them. For a back that ached over the washtub was the same to her as a back that ached under the cross. It was so because, in a way that words cannot tell, she was at once Rose O'Shane and Ireland. That sorrowing love of Christ that has sent Irish men and women fasting and barefooted over sharp rocks and through icy water on St. Patrick's pilgrimage was incarnate in her. In her, too, as if her whole race lived in her, the hopeless glory and despair of generations of young Irish soldiers beating themselves to death against England's iron chest. In her, the objective, disinterested love that is Ireland's unique grace, the holiness which seems inconsistent to our illogical English minds, that rejoices in the beauty of God, forgetting self and self-perfection, The Irish open their arms to him just as they are, and it would no more occur to an Irishman not to rejoice in the beauty of the Lord because it is a sinner who rejoices, than it would occur to him not to rejoice in the crimson of roses. If it were possible for a man to love God, sorry, if it were possible for a man who loves God to perish, and if that man was Irish, he would quite naturally kiss the feet of Christ on the cross as he passed by on his way to hell. That is such an Irish thing to say. There is no debit and credit and calculating of merit, no double entry for the recording angel in Ireland. Ireland, like all the world, is heavy with sin, but Ireland is in love with God. Filled up as she was with pity for the world's sorrow, weary as she was from long hours at the sink and the endless demands of her friends, carrying within her the generations of her country's love and bitterness, Rose longed for the blessed moments of relief and irresponsibility in the Cat and Fiddle, the easing of tension, the laughter rippling through the mind, the easy tears. She was going down and down, was Rose Shane, and what a glory it was that was going down, like a great Spanish galleon adrift on the sea, battered and ready to sink, but still magnificent, her purple sails no less beautiful for being faded by burning suns, her burnished figurehead no less beautiful because its gilding was worn thin by the caresses and the lashes of many salt seas. Like a great ship with crowding sails, she moved slowly down Mimosa Street to the Cat and Fiddle, followed by a stray kitten, like a little black barge in the wash of the great ship. And then one evening, for the first time since she had come to Riverside, she went past the swinging door. Not once only, but several times, to and fro, with the little black cat going to and fro behind her, until the sun went down and darkness began. Then she succumbed and went in. No one looked into Rose O'Shane's eyes when they were misty. No one, that is, but Willie Jewel. Several times she had visited him after going to the Cat and Fiddle, and she thought that there was a look of dread in his eyes. Now that may not have been so at all, for Rose was haunted by the suspicion that everyone thought of her secretly as a drunkard. She was always watching for the slightest confirmation of this. It may therefore have been imagination, but she thought that the accusation was there in Willie's eyes, in the worst form that accusation can take, fear. She never went to see him, mind you, when she was not sober. Rose was always sober, and like all her countrywomen, she distinguished between being drunk and merely having drink taken. But she walked with more dignity, rather more care than usual, inquired with a little too much precision how Willie was, and stooped to kiss him. Then it was that she thought she saw fear, not ordinary fear, but the kind of dread and shock which afflicts a child who has learned something sad or corrupt for the first time, which no one could possibly have prepared him to know, a grown-up crying, a dead bird on the path, the inward certainty that Father Christmas does not come down the chimney. This look of fear, real or imaginary, haunted Rose. The defenseless blue eyes of the dumb child looked at her from the rosy dregs in the crystal glasses in the restaurant, from the pile of dishes and the dingy cloths, from the paving stones of the street, and alone in her room at night, they watched her through the darkness. A man stood by the pavement with snowdrops in his hand. He was gaunt and dark and darkly clad, and his hands were red and chapped. Rose looked at the flowers and thought, how small and white they are, to be in those sad, dark hands. It is like the white host in the hands of the sinful world. She thought of the woods of her childhood in Ireland and remembered that Willie had never been to the country. "If I kept off the drink," she said to herself, "I could often afford to buy him a bunch." She made up her mind that she would give it up, starting that very evening. Yet once again that evening the battered galleon sailed down and down to the Cat and Fiddle, passed the door once, twice, 3 times, then came back a 4th time, and the 4th time it was dark. The hooters on the river sounded nearer in the darkness and very mournful. Rose seemed to be the only person alone in the streets. People were walking home arm in arm or standing, chattering in little groups. From time to time, the door of the Cat and Fiddle swung open, and a gust of laughter and singing streamed out on a beam of light. And then the door swung back, and the night was empty again. Rose pushed open the door and went in. There was a warm, sweet smell of rum. A sailor was leaning over the bar, telling the story of his voyage. He had just come in from the sea, and everyone was handing him drinks. Everything was glowing and warm and friendly. The wine entered into Rose O'Shane like a stream of crimson ease. Softly it filled her veins with rest, wave upon wave of peace. Ease flooded through her, a warm, rising tide. On that night, with its failure, began a long struggle for Rose O'Shane. But there came a night at last, which marked the first of many triumphs, spaced out between many failures, when she did not go into the Cat and Fiddle. She had imagined that when this at last happened, she would experience a sense of exultation, but she did not. She felt like something torn up by the roots, like someone who was denied a friend, and realized that to her, drink had been company as well as comfort and peace. But she took a bunch of early snowdrops to Willie Jewel. Oh, that's so beautiful. That is the end of chapter 10. We will continue next time. I don't think I'll be doing this next week because I'll be traveling, but I will continue the following week. That'll be in the teens of April, I think. Thanks very much for tuning in. Next time.